Welcome to the Courier 13 podcast. Our goal with this show is to present conversations among filmmakers that impart knowledge and inspiration to people who are currently making cinematic content, or for those who aspire to make movies and television but don't have the know-how yet to start, or for people who are just fascinated by the filmmaking process and the entertainment industry. Our guest today is film director and screenwriter Alex Thompson. Did everyone hear that? Did you hear that? Missing? Is that a new Zoom thing?
I've never seen that or heard that.
That's hilarious. Okay. Well, Alex, welcome to the podcast. That was weird.
Thank you for having me.
How are you, man?
I'm good. I think I mentioned I'm in San Francisco right now. So
yeah, you're nice. visiting your grandma right now.
Visiting my grandma, visiting my yaya. And it's a beautiful day here. You know, the sun's just hit the back porch. So I'm eyeing it for later on. We got a new book and it's going to be nice.
Were you born in Chicago?
I was born in Kentucky, actually.
You were born in Kentucky. You're Kentucky. Yeah. When what was your reasoning for moving to Chicago or relocating there?
Well, I went to school in Indiana at DePaul with W, and I did all my summers in an internship at a casting company in Los Angeles. So right at Wilshire and La Brea in the Samsung building. I was up on, I don't remember the floor now, which is nice. It means it's been a while. But every summer I was working as an intern in that office, and then when I got out of school, I went straight to LA. And I was an casting assistant, and I got on. That's when I started getting on sets, and I had a lot of friends who'd done theater who moved to Chicago, and so it was like a place. I knew people there. I had done a short film that was in New York, but I didn't really know anyone there, and so Chicago was like the sort of Midwest compromise in a way, and it you always kind of root for the underdog, or some people do. I think some people kind of want to chase the head of the pack, and I'm always sort of trying to find the underdog. So,
so you think you see Chicago as like the underdog for filmmaking.
I definitely did see it that way back in 2012. So I guess I've been in the city about eight or 9 years. So, yeah, that's how I got there from Kentucky. But my parents my mom's from San Francisco, my dad's from Michigan. So it wasn't like everybody in my family's been from Kentucky. I've never left. I sort of grew up like traveling. And so I never really thought like, oh, I'm going to end up in Lexington. It was always like, hey, San Francisco would be nice, or wherever.
Yeah.
Greece, where my mom's side is from. Greece would be nice, but.
I knew you were Greek because you said Yaya, and I know I used to have a Greek friend, and always on her story she always posts like Yaya and all that stuff. So I was like, I connected 2 and 2. So I was like, okay, so Yaya in Greek is grandmother.
Absolutely.
So yeah. I knew it.
You're like, who is this older woman that my friend is always posting about?
I know. Yeah. I was like, okay, so Yaya. Okay. I didn't know if that was like a nickname at first.
Right. Because like everyone has weird nicknames for their grandma. I just assumed that that's what that was. I'm like, yeah, it's my Yaya.
Yeah.
Yayas are like my Gam Gam or my, my Pop Pop. Some people I know one of my cousins calls my grandpa Pop Pop. And I'm just like, that's so cool, but also like, where did you come up with that? Like no one told me about that. No one said, hey, we're gonna call Grandpa Pop Pop. No, that was never. Right. I was not included in these conversations. What are the perks to being of Greek ancestry? Because I know very little about Greek.
Oh wow, there are a lot of perks. There's a lot of perks. Some existential perks.
What do you mean by that?
Well, Greeks, this is very rough. Here's my very short synopsis, I guess. I grew up very emotional, free, you know, very like quick to cry, quick to always wanting to fix things, always wanting to, you know, I would get very angry, very,
You were an
very
emotional kid.
very emotional, very emotional. Always fighting for somebody's, you know, like my brother was sort of a problem child in some ways, and I was the one at the dinner table being like, you can't put him, don't you dare put him in timeout. Like, you know, he's working through some shit.
You clearly were the introspective artist of the family.
I guess
that
so.
sounds like you have that kind of attitude.
Yeah. Well, I did have like my finger on the pulse of whatever the story was, you know, and there's always more than one story. So, but I read this book by Henry Miller, The Colossus of Marusi, about his travels to Greece, and I started reading it, and he was describing the Greek people as these like volatile, emotional, you know, as likely to laugh as they are cry within the same sentence. And I was like, wow, that's literally, he's describing me. And so I think you're very comfortable with emotions, very comfortable with being sensitive, and a great love of food and community. And, you know, even growing up Greek Orthodox, it's like, I know a lot of people who grew up Catholic, and growing up Catholic sucks, but growing up Greek Orthodox, there is no hell. Jesus barely plays, you know, so there's very little
Really?
like funky stuff. Yeah. Oh, it's very.
Yeah, I'm like traditional Irish Catholic. That was my upbringing, so that's interesting. Jesus wasn't that.
He doesn't play. He's everywhere, but you've also got all the saints, and so you already, like, you know, you're not praying to Jesus. You're like, okay, listen, I'm walking to the drugstore and I don't want to get killed. There's Saint Christopher for travel or whatever. So
yeah,
everybody's got their little thing. Yeah, being Greek is great. You always feel like an underdog because you're short, you're losing your hair, you know, a little early, which is good. It's good for the ego to be like, to not, you know, some of these like super alpha Aryans, you're like, whoa, they've always had it good. And you grow up Greek and you're like, I'm this sweaty, kind of hairy person. You kind of start out at a place where you're like, I gotta fight for
you got claw up. You got to claw your way up.
Yeah, at least you think you do, which is great for being an independent filmmaker. So
that's a perfect personality development to do what you're doing right now. It's funny. Not, you were talking about like Greeks having that duality of like feeling very strong emotions in the same breath.
Yeah.
Do you think, because I was watching St. Francis literally yesterday. I was watching your film St. Francis that you directed. And now that you say that, I felt that sensibility in the writing and in the story itself. Like, there would be moments that were really just like awkward and like funny, but not in like funny, like haha, like funny and like, oh, like I'm funny because I have to laugh at this or I don't know how else to react to it. And then you have these moments of, you know, whether it's her having to go through the process of aborting her child. I mean, I don't want to like go into like deep spoilers, but like, you know, there's these very deep moments. Like there's a duality is basically what I'm saying. There's a very fun, lighthearted aspect of it, but then there's like, no, it's not that at all. It's very uncomfortable at times.
It's life,
think
right?
That's that is life. And do you think you coming from your upbringing, did that inform your storytelling?
I think it was like a lot of growing up with a lot of imperfect stories. You know, there's no tidy story. It's like it's the telling of it that is so exciting, and the person telling it that's so exciting. So there's a lot of like, I don't know, growing up with a family full of sort of myths, and both ancient myths, but also like, you know, the family, everybody has family stories, you know, you grow up sort of mythologizing the people who've died before you were born, or who died when you were young, or, you know, who built this house, or who, you know, walked this trail or whatever. I think, I don't know. I think a sensitivity and an empathy. I think when you're feeling a lot, you're not just feeling a lot for yourself. Obviously, you're feeling, it's out here. It's not like just internal, because that those emotions, that's sharing something, which I think in a lot of cultures you don't share. My dad's side of the family is a little bit more, traditional, white Anglo-Saxon Protestant. Emotions are a little more buttoned up, and which means a little less is shared. And over time, that's sort of, you start to read the signs, you start to read how stories are told in different families, but definitely the Greek side shares. I remember I went to Milos, the island that my family's from, and with a friend of mine who was also Greek, Stephen Callis, who's a DePaul graduate, and we went on this long walk through the mountains and came out to my grandfather's sort of childhood home, and my great uncle was painting like slats on a fence. And while I went and talked to my great aunt, my great uncle sat and held my friend Stephen's hands and talked to him in very slow Greek for 10 minutes. When I came back, Stephen had tears streaming down his face. And he was like, someday I'll tell you what your Theo Diamandi told me, but not today. And I still don't know. But I mean, those Greek guys, they just went there. 10 minutes. They just met each other. And I mean, that's, in some ways, it's like, how willing are you to engage with your actors? How willing are you to engage with story in a way that isn't leaning on archetypes or structure, which keeps you from like the heart of things sometimes. I don't know. Yeah.
So do you think that your Greek upbringing definitely brought a certain directing style into when you're directing like your own movies? Because I mean, you said something about being a very emotional person. So does that bring you, do you know how to bring out the emotion in your actors? And I know like directors aren't supposed to tell how actors are supposed to act, because that's just, it just doesn't give them anything to go off of. But like, do you know how to bring out the emotion in the audience per se?
I guess, yeah. I think it's a good question. I read something by John Irving a long time ago that really stuck with me, and he said, he wrote like Prayer for Owen Meany and Cider House Rules and World According to Garp and all this stuff, and he basically said, like, I'll paraphrase it, but it's like, if you don't risk sentimentality, you risk not saying anything at all. You might write a really clever story from the perspective of a spoon in a drawer of silverware, but it might not really mean much to anyone. And I think that risk is part of being a director, is understanding that if you're willing to take that risk to like continue chasing the truer and truer emotion or the truer and truer experience, that you might come out with something really rewarding. Whereas I think maybe earlier in my directing career or directing life, I was a little bit less willing to like go there. I didn't really want to go there. I didn't want to push anyone emotionally, because my worry was like, well, it's a little box, and what's that big emotion going to look like in that little box? What if it feels melodramatic
in the frame?
In the frame. Yeah. And but I grew up on movies with big emotions. I grew up on classic Hollywood films from the 30s and 40s and 50s, and so when it works, it's Lawrence of Arabia. It's a guy dancing on top of a train that he's blown off the tracks, like coping with like his identity, while bodies burn. There's no way that can't be big. And then in the same token, it's Humphrey Bogart grabbing a probably like queer coded Peter Lorre by the lapels. and smelling his perfume and throwing him down in a chair, and understanding that like that scene could have been small and delicate and quiet, and that for some reason this moment is sort of writ large. So I think just as much as I love the sort of subdued like realism of some of the films that I grew up watching from France and the neorealists in Italy further back, I did sort of have my first film education and storytelling education in a household that was very that was unafraid of feeling things, unafraid of emotion. So yeah, that's a long answer to your question.
No, that's
a great answer.
That's a great answer.
You all have to tell me if I'm long-winded. You'll have to just sort of.
Oh, we'll never say that. You'll never. You'll never say. We're never gonna say that. You know, when you were saying that, well, I think you make a really amazing point that I think directors really do have to learn, or I've had to learn at least, that sometimes we're afraid to say to our actors, really go for it this time and just like go at this emotion, because you're always afraid, and I think you were hitting on this, you're always afraid that it'll come off melodramatic or cliche, and the performance. I think sometimes we as directors and even actors hide behind this notion of realism and subtlety and subduedness, which I think has its place, and I think subtlety is awesome.
Yeah.
But there are moments where, like, even in real life, people aren't always subtle with their emotions. Like, to really pull off a scene realistically, sometimes an actor really has to like lose their shit a little bit.
Yeah.
Like, you gotta not be afraid to lean into that raw, pure emotion.
You'd be surprised what like doesn't show up on camera. You think, like, I think the first short I directed, I was like, this is going to be this sort of the films I was watching at the time were like the Dardenne brothers, who I may have mentioned in a class, just like, I thought those movies look so easy to make. It feels like people just pointing a camera at real life.
Yeah, I remember you talking about this. Yeah.
And I remember reading something, it was like they were shot in like 65, 80 days. And I'm like, what were they doing? But you go and you try to do that. And when you set out and your intention is, I'm gonna make a subdued film, rather than saying what's on the page, what's the story, who are the actors, what are they bringing? I remember all the nuance I thought existed in that story, that sort of documentary nuance, that murmured kind of, did I miss it realism. None of it showed up, at least as far as I could tell. And it was really fascinating the second short was exactly the same, where I was trying to do the exact same thing. And there's like one moment in the film, which was completely accidental. And it was the actor being like totally exhausted by these long takes. It was a really long dialogue scene. And he just like rests his head on his scene partner's shoulder. And it's the thing that I take from that film, was that like, actually, that sort of light on your feet realism comes from pushing discovery. This like not being afraid of saying go for it is just realizing that you have opportunity. Like, being on set is nothing but opportunity. You don't have to go for it and then use it. You can go for it and then say, okay, hide all that, dump a bunch of, nothing on top of that. Like, find a way to bury everything that you just did. But it's fun to try, and if you don't, your actors will never know what it feels like, and you'll never know what it feels like. Again, story providing. What does the story need? Because to me, big, like the film I just did, I thought I directed some big moments, like emotional moments, and the movie came out really, really mellow. I mean, really mellow. And I think it was because everything was rooted in real feelings. I never pushed the actors to go places that didn't feel right within the scene. Never really gave line readings. Never really said, by this point you need to be at a 10 and let's go 5, 7, 10, whatever. But there are big moments. I mean, there's like monsters in the movie, which is just ridiculous. Ridiculous to have to think about monsters, but especially
this is what Guillermo del Toro does every movie that he does.
I know. Yeah. But it was interesting to say, like, oh wow, you can trust that if you're consistent and unified in the way that you're directing and the way that your camera is photographing things, it'll feel of a piece. If your camera is supporting the bigness of the moment, it may not feel so big. It may not feel melodramatic. It might feel as big as it's meant to be. I think we could have gone even bigger with the film in parts, but I'll save that for the next one, I think.
Was this movie that you were just talking about, the one that came out really mellow? It was before or after St. Francis?
After St. Francis. We I hope to God we're picture locking this week.
Okay.
That's so tough. That's so tough. Mm-hmm. And I haven't done a feature yet, but even doing a short, getting a picture locked is tough.
Yeah.
Well, it's mostly because it's not all my decision in this one. There are like executive producers who have input, and so just kind of waiting for everybody's schedule to line up. And but I feel good. I feel like I think it's locked. I'll put it out there. It's locked.
Okay.
By the time you listen to this, it will be locked.
Great. Yeah. Actually, yeah. But probably by the time that people hear this, it'll be done. Well, not done, but locked. Yeah, I don't want to go that far. That's interesting that you bring up, because up until this point in the editing process of your all the stuff you've done, have you ever had to answer to anyone else in the edit?
No.
Okay.
Yeah. It's interesting.
How do you feel about that? How do you feel about it this time around?
Well, I'll tell you, in this instance, the company worked with me on the script stage too. And it was pretty cool and easy when it's not the worst feeling in the world to get notes and to have conversations. Because you come out the other side, and even if 1 out of 10 notes is good, you're like, that was worth it, worth having a conversation. So I like process. I think making a film is kind of like meditating in a way. It's like, it can't be about the self, you have to be, you're serving the project and the story really. So I think the ego doesn't survive long in the process of making a film, or it shouldn't in the best case.
That could fuck really. That could. I don't mean to. Sorry, I swear sometimes. Sorry,
I do too. So
I'm sorry. I'm sorry.
We all do.
Yeah. I always have to like gauge that with the guests. Like, can I drop an F-bomb? But yeah, no, I learned that in my last short. I could see moments because I was co-directing, and co-directing just brings up a whole other set, because it's like a marriage. Like, I think of co-directing like a marriage. Like, you kind of have to be like, okay, there's certain things that I will not compromise on, but I have to make sure you're also happy. Like, we have to make these compromises, but you also have to be happy with what we decide upon. And that is what that taught me. It was exactly what you're talking about with the ego. Like, I recognized, especially during production and in post, like, I was like, there were moments where like I got really defensive, and we were like, no, you can't. I don't know why are you throwing all these ideas out here? I don't even want to listen to them. But then once I pushed my ego aside and said, okay, that's not me, that's my ego talking, then like I could I could actually hear what everyone was saying and realize that they weren't trying to attack the film that we were going for. They just wanted to see if they could possibly make it better. And then in many instances, it would be a mesh of ideas and not just the one that I had preconceived. And that was what we were looking for. But I think a lot of directors have a hard time getting there because I think there's this image of the director as being like, don't listen to anyone. If anyone tries to come at your vision, they're trying to destroy your movie. But I think that's an unhealthy attitude.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think so. I don't know why that is the way that I think we kind of teach directors to feel that way too. There's this whole I really think directors are amazing. I think a lot of directors are amazing. I don't think all directors are amazing. I think some directors are the least qualified people on set. A lot of the time, especially in the university setting.
Oh my God.
But yeah.
Yeah.
No.
Yeah, and you've actually got more like tyrant DPs who are being like, yeah, if you don't do it my way, I'm not going to tell you how to use the camera. But I think it's like, I don't know, this theory of the auteur, this sort of like monolith above everyone it's not helpful. I think most auteurs that we point to and we're like, oh, Hitchcock is an auteur. Oh, I would guess that like Kelly Reichardt's an auteur or Chloe Zhao is an auteur, but they're all actually, if you break it down, they're working with cinematographers that they are enmeshed with creatively, and production designers and editors, and you know, it's like, you think Martin Scorsese could edit The Departed? I mean, that movie's a mess. How could that film have actually worked? Like, rewatch that film for the edit, and it's like somebody went at this with some like kitchen scissors, you know? I mean, it's insane. But Scorsese is an auteur. He's this unimpeachable sort of like, you know, the head at the top of the pyramid. And I think we miss out on understanding exactly how these collaborations should be. I mean, they're like I work with my DP, Nate Hertzellers, and I even feel weird saying my DP. It's like I'm his director. I won't work without him. If I ever did, it would be so weird. It would be so weird. But he's co-director in many cases. On set, I will turn it. He and I set up the shot together. You know, I'm often placing the camera, but then he's adjusting, he's lighting. We've had conversations. I turn to him to ask about performance, story continuity. How
do you, like, you know, I know there's definitely sometimes a big line between the cinematographer and the director, like telling each other like what to do, because sometimes in some cases, I mean, in art school, you know, or like when it comes to like being on your own set and stuff, there are sometimes cinematographers that do take charge for the director, because either the director isn't standing up for like, you know, his own vision, or it's you know, the cinematographer just doesn't like to be told what to do. So how do you, and Nate, you said his name was, right, your DP, like how do you guys create that dynamic where it's like both equal?
Well, I do think it kind of comes down to trust, because everybody's got an asshole inside them, you know? Like,
yes.
You know, in the wrong.
It's true. No, like that's fair.
Yeah. If any one of us is feeling cornered or defensive, we will be a different person than if we feel like we can trust those who are in our corner, really. Mm-hmm. So I think for Nate and I, it's really like radical openness. We're not trying to ding each other. You know, I know this. I know what it feels like because on every shoot that Nate and I have together, there's like one moment where we're not simpatico, when we're not like the collaborators we should be. You know, for instance, on Rounding, this last feature, there was a scene where without really talking to him, I was like, I really think this character's coverage should be him sitting on the bed, or over the shoulder, pushing into the room, past the shoulder, into a close-up. And that's the shot. And then I had to go do a bunch of EP stuff, and I just left. And so we set up, we rehearsed, but Nate was sort of left with this. What I didn't think about was that we were shooting towards a window. And so in the middle of the day, and so it was this insane process for him of working with, we didn't have an 8K out there blasting sunlight in. It was him working with little hidden bounces and like kickers and all this stuff. And I came back and I was like frustrated because the little girl in the scene had to walk over a bunch of lights to get to her dad and like sit in his lap and be a part of the scene. And I left Nate with this problem, I didn't, his co-pilot was gone, I didn't, and now I'm there blaming him. Really what it is realizing, creating, I think, just through time and conversations, in an understanding that you're figuring it out. Real again, like I just stressing, like it's a process of discovery. I don't like thinking. I have this like really dumb thing that I say all the time when I'm reading scripts, which is like, if the line can only be said in one way to make sense, then it's a bad line. Like if you're on set trying to be like, it only really works if you say, but I don't want to go. And or like, you're defensive, but you're also flirtatious, and you've got a glimmer in your eye. Basically, if Harrison Ford did it, it would make sense here. It's like, okay, probably a bad line. Just like,
probably not that well written.
Yeah. Or like anytime, like no one. I have this thing about like dialogue, where I think people are really hung up on dialogue when they're writing scripts. And I think dialogue is great, but you've got to have the story too. You've got to have the bones of it underneath. People remember movies because of the way they made them feel. I don't honestly remember any lines of dialogue from Frances Ha. I know it's brilliantly written, but I loved that movie for the whole thing, for the cumulative experience. And so I find that when you're directing a scene and you're not focused on, does this feel real on the monitor? Does this sound real? Does it sound grounded? Is there a process of discovery going on in the scene? Like how can we find that like sparkle of like, oh shit, we just stumbled upon something, rather than, okay, let's just do a pickup of this one line because it's sort of funky. I think when you're in that sort of like, when you're working on the engine together with everyone gets the sense that they're a part of the engine, and they trust you more as a director, I think, because they're seeing their decisions actually get executed. They're seeing their choices actually show up on screen, rather than a director who comes in and says, here's a swatch for the bedroom, here's a swatch for the living room, here's what I want the costumes to look like, here's what I want the score to sound like, this is my vision, welcome to the train, hop on board, I'll be up front. It's just a different vibe when you come on and you're like, you're here for a reason.
Yeah.
What do you bring?
Yeah.
These are really long-winded answers.
No, but we're hitting it.
Great answers.
There's so many golden nuggets in this. You know what I'm saying?
Golden nuggets.
Golden
I sure
nuggets
hope so.
of information.
Oh, I hope so.
Because I obviously know that you're right, and obviously you have more experience. You've done much more than I have. I'm not comparing ourselves, but
happy to keep it.
But I know what you're saying is true, because I've had to learn those lessons. Like, if you cannot be, because I see the director not as a tyrant, but as like a creative leader, like the creative coach of the team. Like, they gotta like make sure everyone's on the same page and we're going forward together. We're all doing our different things as teammates. We all have different things that we do, and everyone's got to feel like they're doing their thing to contribute to this win. But the director's the coach, and they got to check to make sure that everything's like working cohesively together. If you don't let your teammates, which I would like your production designer, DP, actors, your crew, if they can't feel like they're doing their thing, that they get to perform their thing the best that they can do, and that they don't have at least a say in that, one, the art isn't going to be that great because your teammates aren't doing things that they necessarily believe in fully. And as the production goes on, resentment is going to build up between you. I mean, it's undoubtedly that's what's going to happen.
For sure.
So that's hugely important.
I was like a horrible director in a lot of ways on this last shoot because I was like, I didn't have a wardrobe designer. I was like, I'm going to do wardrobe.
Oh.
I'm just going to
I mean, are you a clothes person?
No. I was like, everyone's going to have one. I was like, here's where we can save money. Everyone's going to have one wardrobe, one outfit, and that's it. And I'm going to manage it. And the one outfit thing was fine, but obviously there's a lot more to wardrobe than just that. There's having multiples. There's mapping out, like there's a lot of blood in the film. So it's like, when is this article blood stained? When is it getting blood on it? When has it had old blood on it? And so it ended up falling in the lap of Catherine, our hair and makeup artist. And Catherine, at the end of the shoot, was like, you're a great director. Next time you make a film, fucking direct. Because anything else that you take on ends up in somebody else's lap.
Yeah.
And it was a great lesson. And I felt really good because I was like, oh, wow. That means I did a good enough job that Catherine doesn't hate me on this shoot, even with this big fuck up, you know? So it's like, if you can be a good person, then a lot can be forgiven. That's a little, there's a nugget, I guess. But like, you know, at the end of the day, like you said, Tim, if you're the coach and your players don't feel like you understand that you're not running drills with them, that you're standing on the sidelines, like if you don't understand that you're not the one running the ball every single take, then you're in trouble. And nobody's going to perform for you. You know, you're the one who gets to say when you move on, but you're also the one who has to imbue each take and each setup with a sense of discovery and excitement. Because that's what's going to fuel the day, is when everybody gets done with the shoot day and says, that was absolute hell. Wow, we got some really incredible stuff. Lunch was great and it was on time. Thanks for everything. You know, like,
that's a happy crew.
That's a happy crew. Yeah, and happy cast. I think lunch is important for everyone. Let's be honest.
True.
Yes.
Everyone's got to eat.
100%.
Danielle, are you a director as well?
I do direct. I haven't been able to direct anything recently, just, you know, because of COVID. So I was directing something and then COVID hit. So it was like, you know, it kind of went out the window because we were supposed to make 2 films, but then like the second film was like cut halfway through. So like, you know, but I haven't been able to, I have been writing more though. I did a lot of writing during the pandemic. I did write a story called Euthanasia, and that one is currently my favorite short film that I've written. I obviously need to work on it more.
Great time.
But it is one of my favorites just because, you know, like the dramatic creativity just like flowed right out of me when I was thinking about it, and I didn't stop writing about it. Or like thinking either. And it was, you know, that was like so in Columbia, we have like a D3 class, and it's a directing 3, and it's like the final directing class before you graduate. I was supposed to take it, you know, before I went to LA, and I got into this like CELA program, which is semester in LA for Columbia students. So they get involved and they meet industry professionals. And I was going to take that, like the D3 class before the program, but they were like, the main director, or like not director, but the main teacher that usually does the classes, I had classes with him before, so he knew me pretty well already. So he like called me up and he was like, hey, just wanted to let you know, I saw that you got into the semester in LA program, so I really want you to do this program instead of doing this class. Because, you know, this class, you'll get another chance to do another movie in the future, but when will you ever get a chance to do this program?
Right.
So they were saying, so he said, basically, do this, and then, but I'm going to give you some tips for this script that you wrote. He was like, I really enjoyed the characters and the dramaticness of it. And the story was about how this old man who, you know, he just couldn't move anymore. He couldn't do anything anymore. He just wasn't, he obviously has nothing else going for him. He can't walk. He can't, do anything. And he has a nurse to do it all for him. But his daughter still wanted him to, she still wants him to live, obviously, because it's her dad, but the dad is like, at the end of the day, it's my life. It's my decision. You still have your life to live. I'm done living my life. So I was like, I want to task this nurse with, with the fact that she's going to have to euthanize me in the end. So there's like this whole conflict, like the nurse is kind of against it just because it's not her thing. The daughter is obviously against it, because it's her dad, but the dad's like, I'm a vegetable. I can't do anything anymore. So that was like my favorite one, because it was the kind of dramatic thing that I wanted to write. So, but I'm
so
currently focusing on writing. Yeah. Thank you.
So interesting.
It's got a great conflict at the center. Great characters too.
Thank you. That means a lot coming from a director that has like a movie in a festival. So thank you for that.
Oh, listen, no, it sounds great. It really does. Regardless
Thank you.
I think anyone would say so. Yeah, it's rare, I think, that there's a story where you can sort of find some central conflict that doesn't feel like it has an obvious, that doesn't have you already, with a short film especially, like thinking of what's the ending going to be. It's like a person who refuses to wear pants, like it's like, I bet he's going to wear pants by the end, or something. Like it's so cool just to be like, oh, I'm just excited for what these three characters, what their interactions are going to be, and how you're going to suss out all that, whatever that complexity is, in a short amount of time. That sounds awesome.
Yeah, thank you.
I have a question for the both of you then. I have a question for you, Danielle, and I have a question for you, Alex.
Perfect.
Daniela, I want to know what prompted you to write something that subject matter that is so difficult for people to talk about. The process of assisted suicide. Yeah.
So before, it's kind of like a funny story. It kind of made me, like think. I usually have conversations with my mom, like, what would we ever do if there's ever like a zombie apocalypse or something like that? Like, and if one of us, obviously, it kind of sprouted that idea, if something like that big or like an accident were to happen, and it affected only one of the people. There's 4 people in my family. So like, what if it affected only one person? Either, one of us turned into a vegetable after an accident, or the zombie apocalypse, like one of us turned into a zombie. My mom said, if it ever happens to me, I want you to be the one to do it, to either like, to have to do it. Because my sister, she's a very more emotional person. she can't bring herself to do it. So and then my mom knows that I'm like a little bit, she said it like this, like, I know that you would obviously be sad about doing this, but I know that you would be the one to be able to go through with it in the end. So it was kind of like, it's kind of like, obviously, hopefully, knock on wood, this never happens, or like, this never actually like,
Comes to
like
pass.
happens. So yeah, so it kind of came like that. And I've seen so many stories like on Grey's Anatomy as well, because I'm a big fan of Grey's Anatomy, where it comes to that, like, the person in the hospital that just doesn't have anything else going for them, or the movie Me Before You with Emilia Clarke and Sam Claflin. I don't know if you guys saw that.
Yeah.
But he wants to die. She didn't want him to die, but at the end of the day, it was his choice. He never changed his mind. So that's kind of like, they kind of like sparked the idea. And I know that so many of these stories have been written before, but I felt like, just a 3-person like cast in a small dark house, kind of like, I kind of like wrote and sparked up the same story, but differently too as well. So
I feel like you are going to make it something different, even not even without even trying, it's just going to be you and all the people that make it are going to make it different.
Yeah.
I always feel like it's like not a good excuse not to do something if you're like, wow, there's already a lot of movies about sports. Why would I make a sports movie? And it's like, well, no, you've got something.
I have a theory about that. Like I have this weird, not weird, but I have this theory basically, like whenever someone's like, oh my goodness, but what if it's, we've seen this kind of story so many times, what if I can't do it differently? If the story that you're telling is coming from a place that is authentically you, it can only be an original telling, because there's only one. I know this is going to sound really cheesy. There's only one you. There's only one you who was born with this specific life story, these specific perspectives. Unless you're trying to do a beat for beat copy of someone else's movie, if you are writing it authentically, and by authentically I mean from your perspective, from your experiences. Now, it doesn't have to be your experiences. Maybe it's like other people's experiences that have been told to you. But like, if it's coming from an emotional core that is you don't have to worry about, oh, is this going to seem so much like this or that, or
Yeah,
totally. I feel like that about romantic comedies, where I recently watched like What Women Want and When Harry Met Sally and Sleepless in Seattle, and those movies are so solid. They're so good, actually, and they have brilliant cast. They're beautifully shot. Obviously they're all shot on film, and so it's like you kind of have to do a little bit more working with film. But it made me realize, like, I was like, why do I not watch romantic comedies anymore? And I think a lot of it is that a lot of the romantic comedies on Netflix, they're almost like quotes of quotes of quotes. It's like they're making a romantic comedy based on like the log line of a romantic comedy, which itself was based on like my memory of a romantic comedy, rather than like, and so starting from a place of like, I'm going to make this genre of film, rather than like, I have a story to tell, man, last bookstore in New York City, in this like shark of a real estate agent who ends up sort of falling for the bookstore owner online. They don't know that each other is this person. What a great story. And so then you've got mail from there, rather than saying, all right, we need a rom-com. We need rom, we need com, we need a few movie stars, we need quirky best friends. So I think it's interesting. It's like when it's coming from a personal place or like a story place, I think, you can't help but bring your own touch. It's also funny too, you said that Tim is like, I remember when we were doing St. Francis, it was like, oh my God, are people going to say that this is just like Obvious Child, which none of us had seen. We had never seen Obvious Child, which is also about a woman in her early 30s who is in Obvious Child debating whether to get an abortion. Or maybe she does get an abortion. I've never seen it. But it's like, once the film was made, it was like, nobody was like, oh, it's just another Obvious Child. It was like, oh, this series of films about, abortions. And isn't it great that we're making more than one movie about abortions and more than one experience about abortions and postpartum and all these things? It wasn't like, hey, I saw postpartum in Revolutionary Road, so no more postpartum movies. I don't know. Yeah, I think people get discouraged easily too. But,
yeah.
Do you think that we just went into such an abstract territory, because to me it's like, you can't do a story that means anything unless somewhere in the back of the storyteller's mind they're trying to answer a question. Like, you're trying to answer a question about life itself, or the human experiences, or what it's like to want something really badly and have a hard time getting it. Do you think that that's what's missing? Do you think there are, people making films now, or some of the films that we see today, where it's like, there are some directors who just want to make, or I'm not, targeting directors specifically, but do you think that there's like stories just being made that don't have a question that's trying to be answered or even alluded to, and it's just trying to make content for the sake of making content?
Well, content definitely feels like, justifiably, like a bad word, or at least it feels like it is in contrast to like storytelling. It doesn't mean that storytelling can't be content, but like starting out down the path of making content,
Right.
isn't.
Like we need content to fill the hours. So.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Which is a real, like, I mean, it's something people are talking about, I think, a lot. I think Scorsese wrote like a new essay about it, kind of. It was like Federico Fellini's birthday, I think, and instead he wrote an essay a really beautiful essay about how content is kind of burying film. But I also think it's like, it's style too, chasing style over story. Nate and I talk a lot about this, because there's a lot of pressure as a young filmmaker to make beautiful images, to make images that are beautiful. Like, we all have reels, right? Or we're all building our reels, or we think we are. It's like, this is going to look great in my reel. Or I guess in some ways it's like the work is serving a sale of something that is going to be independent of the work. But I love the challenge of not making any image that's supposed to stand alone without the story that surrounds it. Just truly serving the story 100%. Like Harris Savides and Darius Kanji all sort of reject this idea of style. They're trying to tell stories, and they're trying to find the right tools to tell the story. And sometimes that means limiting their toolkit so that they're only working with certain colors or certain lenses, so that when they do work with a different lens or a different color in the third act of the film, it's meaningful. I'm not exactly talking about like the girl in the red dress in Schindler's List, but sure, working in black and white is a choice, and then
right.
Color, feels really vivid and vibrant. But I think a lot of times what we're talking about when we talk about like empty stories or empty storytelling is stuff that kind of privileges style over story and over perspective. like you're saying, Tim, it's our perspective too as filmmakers and as storytellers that are important. Talking about the Greek relatives, it's not just that they are telling good stories, it's that they are telling good stories. The storytellers are meaningful.
Their way of telling the story and their perspective on the events of telling that story is what makes it even more interesting sometimes than the actual plot of the story that they're telling.
Yeah, my grandmother just a few days ago read me an email of a friend of hers who had written an email of how the brakes on her Lexus stopped working and she almost hit a group of people at the mall, and it was a funny story, but her reading it and sort of commenting on it, her perspective on it made it hilarious. I was immediately like, this belongs in a film. But if I were to record that scene, it would have to have some of Yaya's perspective, because actually it wasn't the scene itself of a 90-year-old running into a parking sign that was so funny. It was this very specific POV that made it special. I wish I'd recorded it. I could share it with you all. She's really funny.
That's so funny. That's because, it's just really like I don't know why, but it is like the family stories that are just, that bring out you hear stories about like your grandma and so my grandma has a lot of sisters and one brother, but it's just like the stories that they had about in the past. It's like, oh my God, like this could be in a movie. How you said, it's literally about, the perspectives about people and all that. Even in my own life right now, like me being in LA and me, just going through daily life, I have my moments where I just say, oh, what just happened to me could literally be in a movie and it would be funny. Or it could be like, oh my God, like an oh my God moment, or like a dramatic moment or a sad moment. Not saying that there's like a lot of sad or dramatic moments, in my life, but it's just like, it's just like those little moments that could be like, oh, this moment could be relatable to so many other people. It's not that
you're seeing the universality in everything
yes.
you do, and it's like, I think that's because we're in this industry, or just in the game of, I mean, I don't know if game is the word, of storytelling, if you want to call it that, but in the craft of storytelling, you realize that like reading the news, you find things that can be like everything. I'm not saying that everything should be a film, but everything with the right approach. It's like what Lawrence said. I mean, Daniela, we met in an internship, and we had a supervisor who was like, he wanted us to continuously pitch him stuff. He's like, always remember, like, what is your approach into the story? What is your perspective going into the story? Like, how are we as the audience being placed into the story? And you realize you could look at your life or everything around you. Like, I don't think that cinema and life are really that separate. I feel like we are all living a movie. We just maybe don't revere it as much as we do some of our favorite movies, which is kind of sad, because I think we should revere life as much as we revere the movies that we love. But
yeah,
the same thing happens in your life that happens in a movie. There's a structure to it. It's a journey.
Well, when you start editing a film, or you get into the place where you're like, okay, I've got to convince people that a person's going from A to Z, over the course of this film. The first thing you do is you write these dialogue scenes that are sort of tell people what to feel. But then after a while, you realize like I'm looking at some like pillows, right? Like there could be a scene of me like fluffing these pillows, and that could be a transitional moment. Like it could mean something for me to make my bed. There's that scene in Beau Travail of the soldier making his bed at the very end, and that scene is a guy making his bed, it also feels like a scene of someone contemplating suicide, but it's just somebody making their bed. And it's like, but that the things that mean something to you will mean something to other people. And it's kind of a cool way into film language, because your perspective is only communicable through film language. So like, Daniela, the stuff that makes you think that the life that you live walking down the streets of LA is cinematic, whatever that stuff is, it's the way that you are going to see it. It's the Steadicam shot following in front of you, where you step into a close-up and turn into this, and it's us like watching you from the passenger seat of the car that's been following you for 3 blocks, and then cutting back to your feet and your face. It's those things, like the process of translating the things that make us feel, wow, my life is cinematic. Those are the things that we use in the making of it to make those stories feel like they have perspective. It all plays. It's something I feel like I've been saying a lot, but like it's like the metaphor can't be broken. Like there really is like a direct correlative between life and stories, and with film specifically, because it's through eyes, through visuals. You just can't. You could stretch that metaphor forever.
I think there's also like a big thing right now. I don't know, how like, involved you are with like the trends right now, but I see it a lot in like the trends with like my friends, and like a lot of people in that are my age. They all say like, oh, like I want to romanticize this part in the movie, like I want to romanticize like this specific relationship in this movie, or like this friendship, and they're all searching for that either relationship, friendship moment that they see in movies, but they're not looking for it in life. And I think that's like the biggest thing. Like, they don't realize that a lot of the moments that they're experiencing in life, like a lot of directors, writers, actors grab those moments from their own life to put it into their artwork. I don't think that they realize that that's when like art imitates life, so they don't I don't know if that, and it's because they don't because they don't actually like look at it the way we as creators do. But it's a very interesting thing to see, that they talk about this. So yeah.
Well, and I think all people also, like what you were saying, people don't understand how crazy the little things are. Like there are so many synchronicities and just weird things that happen in your life that are kind of attracted to you, and moments that are attracted in your life. And you can kind of let those slip by you and not really notice them. And that's what I think a lot of people do. They kind of let it slip by them. But I feel like really good artists stop and recognize those moments. And they're like, oh, this is important. Like this, even though it may have been a few moments of my life, but this kind of thing that someone would just gloss over actually has a really profound meaning to it.
Yeah.
I feel like I'm speaking completely in the abstract, so I don't know if anything is resonating.
Well, I think, I mean, it works for me on like a practical level. I've been just starting to meditate over the last few weeks, and it's all about kind of like actually taking moments, and it doesn't have to be, you don't have to benefit from, it doesn't have to be like I zone out and meditate for an hour and a half a day. It can be like just being able to look at a flower on the side of the road, or a sunset, or smell the air for one inhale and one exhale, and like that can be meaningful. That moment can be meaningful and sustaining. And I think that's true of, as filmmakers, you can highlight any little thing can be writ large on the screen in a way that's meaningful to someone or some character. And I think those are the moments we remember when we're watching films. Those are the things that we really, resonate for us.
Yeah. It's very interesting, I think. I think it goes back to like the classic moment. Does art imitate life, or does life imitate art? And in some cases it goes both ways. But
Yeah.
You know, it's hilarious. I was thinking about this literally today on a walk. Like I was thinking about like kind of what you were saying, like what comes first? Does life imitate the art, or does art imitate life? And because sometimes like you'll hear people complaining about like how, oh, that TV show or that film was so provocative and vulgar, and I didn't appreciate that. I feel like these filmmakers and these executives are trying to poison our society. I'm like, you realize that the artist who made that is digesting what he or she or whomever is experiencing in their life, and is regurgitating that into a story. So if you want to blame someone for making that into what it is, it's life, it's the society, it's everybody, it's the collective. Like I don't believe, basically what I'm saying is, I guess I'm way more on the side of, I believe that life is imitating art, and that life is informing the artist and the art. And I guess it does have a circular effect eventually, but
yeah. Like I remember in like way in the beginning of COVID, so think like May, March, you know, right in the beginning of summer at the end of school last year. So it was, the movie came out with I don't remember what the movie was called, but it was like the one where they have it was an action movie, the one where they have neck like a kind of like a neck cuff or something like that, and then they have to find a way, they were all drugged, kidnapped, put into this like Hunger Games type thing. Wow. And then they had to like escape. So it was kind of like, you know, and it was like the rich people. Oh, it was called The Hunt. And it was with what's her name? Hilary Swank. She was like the rich lady that was hunting all these poor people that didn't have enough money, you know. So it was and it kind of made fun of how society is today a little bit. So, but it was I don't know, I kind of sensed like a little bit of British humor, but I don't know. It kind of, and then people went on to say that it was that action movies like this are what cause, you know, people to like go and do like bad things, like shootings and all that stuff. And I'm like, okay, sometimes, sure, we do have like, and I've had a lot of people tell me this, like they say like, you as a creator and as a director that you want to be in the future, you kind of have a responsibility to society to not show some things or to not do some things. Like you have a like, and yes, some people do really like, you know, they take video games super seriously, or they take, you know, what they saw and they actually apply it to their life, you know. But at the end of the day, it's not our responsibility as creators to take, you know, or to control what people do after they see a movie or after they play a video game. It's, at the end of the day, it's the person who, you know, who's doing these things. It's their choice.
Well, it's also the question of, is it the artist's responsibility to parent society?
Yeah. And it's not, I think.
If your films too are reflecting a society in which like guns are widely available and a part of culture, then you really are like reflecting a culture as well, you know, that is enabling these mass shootings and things. And I mean, the availability of guns is way more impressive in its ability to influence these things than any piece of storytelling. It's so interesting that you say that. Yeah, I think a lot about like the way that society can be, or a critical culture can be defensive as well. I often reread Pauline Kael's review of Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid, which is a film I really love the movie. And I find it kind of quietly radical. It's this like existential crisis film, you know, about these two cowboys who are way past their prime. You know, they're not like the society has moved on without them. And Pauline Kael just like rips this movie to shreds and is like, this is just capitalist bullshit. It's this sort of monoculture, American, vapid, empty. And it's really interesting because I think that when it's coming out around the same time as Midnight Cowboy, you know, it doesn't have the grit and the grime and the vulgarity of those films. But when you watch it outside of the culture that it was presented in, you know, now that we have endless iterations of like the entertaining Western, you know, we have TV shows and, you know, hundreds of hours of stuff to look at. It's like, you know, what is, I think the fear maybe from a reviewer is like, oh my gosh, if I don't denounce this film, we will regress to John Wayne movies for forever. We won't keep going. Like De Niro won't be able to keep making these amazing De Niro movies. But then I think this fear of like, I don't know what it is, but it's just interesting looking at things from different time periods and saying like, oh wow, this doesn't seem that crazy to me. This doesn't seem that controversial. Or, oh wow, you know, The Matrix really isn't the reason why a bunch of students shot up a school in the early 2000s, and it probably had a lot more to do with these 15 other things. But yeah, but I'm really not an authority on any of that.
Yeah,
Neither
I don't
am
think
I.
any of us are. Yeah,
we're just doing our best
We're just doing our best.
from our perspective to
That's
rationalize it. Yeah, it's interesting. Because it's interesting what you said, Alex, about, do you think, you know, you were saying that maybe sometimes critics just go at something because they feel like filmmaking or the art has to change, or it has to give new light, like new things have to emerge, like not regressing.
Yeah.
Because and I guess that's the nature of life, and that's the nature of art. Like we have to feel like we're evolving. We can't just accept, even if what's coming out is good, we can't accept, like there always has to be like for every Renaissance there must then be an age of Impressionists. Even if you like the Renaissance, even if you like everything that was made, there's like, okay, well now we need art has to go somewhere new, and we don't really know where it's going, but it has to go somewhere different. So now we're doing this now. And then you keep, it's fascinating to me because sometimes you don't even know why the art is changing, but it just does. And I feel like people feel like they need to do something different.
Totally. I think if you made a film today if you made a film like if they released like Casablanca today or something, if you made a film that was like a film from the 40s that had this like constantly moving camera, you know, like flirt with melodrama every step of the way, big colorful characters, humor, drama, action, suspense, shot it on a stage, it would be radical. It wouldn't be old-fashioned. It would be like, whoa, this is insane. This is crazy. It's like you're using the whole box of crayons all at once. Whoa. But if you go back to like 1970, it's like, fuck all that. None of that's radical. That is the old way of doing things. That's the studio system. That's the studio way of shooting movies. What you don't hear about is that like many studio heads were already railing against what they called coverage. You know, they were already anti-coverage and anti, you know, wide shot, medium shot, close up. And that, you know, this is the system that gave us Hitchcock and Michael Curtiz and some really incredible directors who just like flexed their muscles for 20 films, 25, 30, 40 films. I think Steven Soderbergh comes kind of close, where he just comes out and does stuff that feels so fresh and so new. And then when you really look at it, you're like, oh, like Magic Mike is, basically like an intersection of a musical and an Italian neorealist drama. Okay, cool. Like, I think it's brilliant. It's just interesting, it gives something a little bit of time, and suddenly it can be radical again through context.
I think, the big thing about Magic Mike, the way that the trailer was made, it made it seem like it was a comedy.
Yeah.
And it was kind of like a trap, kind of like, oh, Channing Tatum, he was in 21 Jump Street. They have all these attractive men without their shirts off being strippers. It's going to be, we can make it seem like it's going to be a comedy. And then when you actually watch it, it was not a comedy whatsoever. It was a drama film. Yeah. And it's not something that I expected. Like, I watched it with my sister and we were like, oh, I thought this was supposed to be a funny movie. And it wasn't. It had funny moments, but it was more about the drama. And I think that's a really clever way of grabbing people into watching a movie. You make it seem like it's going to be this way, but it's not. So it's funny that you even mentioned Magic Mike. I was not expecting to bring up Magic Mike.
When we started going to Magic Mike, I laughed inside. I was like, "This is hilarious." I was not expecting this again. No. I've never seen Magic Mike. I guess I should see Magic Mike, because I've always assumed that it was kind of like this comedy. I didn't initially go into it thinking that
there's some serious filmmaking there.
Is it really? Okay, all right. I'll check it out.
He makes some choices. It's like, it's radically underlit. I don't know. There's barely any coverage. It's really interesting. It's a weird movie to be a super popular stripper movie starring Channing.
Starring Channing Tatum.
Starring
Channing Tatum, of all people.
Yeah. I haven't seen Magic Mike XXL. So I don't know.
I haven't seen the second one either.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. Well, maybe that's the next podcast movie night.
We can do an Alex Thompson podcast part 2, Magic Mike XXL coverage.
It's basically just a review of Magic Mike XXL.
Yeah. I'm happy to. Yeah. Also, what is Magic Mike without Steven Soderbergh? Does it?
Yep.
It's probably not. Well, it's not the same for sure. I mean, I can't, because I haven't seen it. I can't say what it would be without it.
Yeah, you may not like it in its current form. I don't know. It's interesting. Yeah, but we watched it recently, Danielle, and had the same impression. Where it's I feel like I remember this being way goofier.
Yeah.
And I think it's like my memory of the trailer is just burned into my mind from whatever that summer of watching movies in theaters was.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It did come out during a summer, didn't it? Yeah.
I think so. Yeah.
But it's really interesting. But yeah, how do you, kind of changing the subject to St. Francis, I'm sorry.
Oh, sure.
From Magic Mike to St. Francis.
Yeah. Yes. That's such a segue.
I know. But and kind of going back to how us as creators, we somehow do influence people that watch our films. What do you for the people that watched St. Francis, you obviously don't know every single person that watched St. Francis, but for the people that did, what do you want them to take away from the movie? Because there's always a message in every movie.
Yeah, or at least I guess people do walk away with something. I think I would hope that they take away a bit more empathy for themselves, for one another, maybe feel a little bit less shame. Maybe reach out and talk to someone about something that they wouldn't have otherwise. I feel like that's sort of what the film is about like talking to one another. You know, there's that great line that the mom, Bridget's mother says, you know, women should talk about it more often, be less lonely. And I love that. I honestly, that's sort of what Kelly articulated that the film was about the whole time. And I was like, oh, I'm sure that's super subtextual. And what's funny is that is what the movie's about. I mean, it's like very clear. The whole film is about people talking to each other. I mean, the final scene is a little girl running through running out of school, like in a romantic comedy, to the airport, and saying, like, I'll call you when it happens for me, I'll call you, we'll talk about it. So I think I would hope that folks, are maybe a little more open, a little less calcified in their beliefs or in their judgment of themselves or one.
Can I say what I took from it?
Yeah.
Can I say what I took from the movie? I definitely get what you're saying there. I think it definitely is a movie about engaging in dialogues about difficult things and feeling vulnerable to do that. But also, given the character of Bridget and just like her journey, or just where she's at in the film, it seemed like the film was trying to be like, don't be ashamed of where you're at the present moment of your life. Like, it's okay to be wherever you're at. Because, she's this 36, I believe, right, 36-year-old who is still still really doesn't know what her life is about, like what she's supposed to do. But it's kind of like a meditation on that and being okay with wherever you're at and not kicking yourself for wherever you're at that.
Yeah, I think that's spot on. I think that's spot on. Absolutely.
What was it like to do that film with your partner, Kelly O'Sullivan, who is the lead actress and the writer, who did a very good job, who wrote St. Francis? I'm always like very curious on like when it's a romantic partnership and they're collaborating artistically and you're doing different things. Was that hard, difficult, easy? Like, what was that?
It was mostly hard. In one way, it was really easy because Kelly's script was wonderful. So rather than trying to figure out, like, I feel like there's a lot of pressure in school or in the learning process. We think we're supposed to figure out, like, who are we as artists? Like, what's my vision? What's my identity as a filmmaker? Do I like camera movement or not? Do I want, am I the director? Am I Wes Anderson? Who am I? Am I Greg Gerwig? Rather than doing that, it was just like, okay, my job is very script specific. I need to get out of the way of the script. So, like, what does that mean? That means not trying to figure out what my take is on the material at all. It's like using the script as a Bible for, the truth is in there and in the experiences of the actors who are acting it. So it's not me being like, all right, here's what I see in this moment. I've got this, here's what I think the movie's about. It's like chasing down naturalism every step of the way, so first of all, preemptively getting the ego out of the way, preemptively. And then using that as the motivation to argue every single scene and every single line of dialogue. I mean, we went through every line of every action description, every piece of dialogue, every scene. And we talked through it all and I was a part of the scripting process from page 10 onward. So it was like very, very organic. But it mostly meant, on the plus side, that we could be really honest with each other. Really honest. And so when we didn't like something, we weren't going to not mention it. Because for me, the stakes were too high, right? I'm not here to serve this person. I'm here to serve this story. So if I don't think this is the best choice for this story, then I'm not going to be quiet about it. On the other side, it meant like never ever getting to escape ever. It was like being on set, being like, oh my God, am I even a good director? Am I even doing a good job? Getting everything, getting home, and then hearing, I don't think we got it. Because Kelly was in front of the camera, right? We didn't have time for playback. We didn't have time for any of that. And so we often met back at home, and she was often like, I don't think we got that. I think that scene was not good, et cetera. I don't think I'm doing a good job. And so what I started doing was cutting together these little like sizzle reels was set to like Cat Stevens of like fun clips from the movie to show everybody working on it, because they're working so hard. Like, hey, it's looking good.
It's working.
It's working. Don't worry. And it was kind of cool because then we started to get like more, when the more like prestigious theater actors started coming in, the folks that we didn't know quite as well, you know, some of the Steppenwolf ensemble members were coming to like Starved Rock to walk around the woods for 8 hours. They would be like, hey, I saw some footage, like it's looking good. And then when they're being asked to like carry C-stands from location to location, they're like, I bet it's looking great, instead of, God, I'm on this like podunk indie that is just falling apart in front of me. So so it's like, it's the best of times, it's the worst of times, but at the end of the day, it's like those conversations that are going to be so hard but get you to the better film, they never don't happen when you're working, you know, collaboratively. And with Kelly and I, they never didn't happen. We never didn't have a conversation.
Conversation about what?
About anything. About anything and everything. Every cast member, every line of dialogue, you know, every prop, every costume decision. It was always, it was really like, it was just a really great process. It was like having a real process on the script, which was great. So I wish that upon anybody. You know, I kind of feel bad for people who are working with writers or filmmakers, and you kind of have like, if you're not on the same page, you like get on Zoom or like meet for coffee, and you kind of have like a stilted conversation, kind of talking around the things that you don't like and around the things that you're unsure about. And then you're like, well, it was nice meeting. Yeah, I'll see you at the next meeting. And then you go home to your partner and you're like, God, they're such a fucking idiot. Like, why, you know, why don't they understand that this role has to be played by this kind of person? Or, you know, that this shot that they want to do is just ridiculous and meaningless. You know, you don't get to have those conversations the way that, I think also having Nate on the film was really great though, because Nate and I were really on the same page with the intention of the film, which was like, get out of the way of the script. And that's why it's on a 40 mil handheld for most of the film. It's not meant to be a big kind of show off camera.
No. Yeah, well, I mean, if that's what you were going for, you achieved that. I mean, you really did. I mean, you really did get out of the way of the script, because in many of the scenes, the camera work is beautiful. I mean, it's very well directed, and it's almost like this observational fly on the wall, just like we're just witnessing this happen.
The intention was that, I think with the 40 mil, you give space for comedy and drama to come out of the frames. It's not like you're like, okay, we got to switch to the 28 because it's a funny scene, or we've got to go on the 50 because it's dramatic. You really get to just live on that lens. And then those really long lens shots were sort of inspired by Haskell Wexler's work and Coming Home and I think Bound for Glory, where, you know, to combat stuff that could be melodramatic, shooting it on this ultra long lens, really it calls to mind this documentary quality. the camera is unobtrusive. And so in the moments of like camaraderie and sweetness, and I think it's a big mistake people make where they're like, okay, the scene is sweet, so I've got to film it in a sweet way. I've got to really like get up in the sweetness. And the audience just goes like, oh, I don't want that sweetness. I don't believe it. I don't trust it.
It's too much sweetness.
Too much sweetness.
You're trying to hit me too hard with the sweetness.
Yeah, but if you're like, hey, we're just a few blocks down and we noticed some sweetness over there, you're like, yeah, that is pretty sweet. Which is where we were on that long lens. We were like, quarter of a mile away most of the time. So.
What was the biggest thing you learned from making that film? I know that's super vague.
No. It's funny. I didn't think that St. Francis was going to be the type of film that I made ever. And we didn't watch any films, any indie dramedies in preparation for it. We didn't really know what it was. And I think that I brought that up with this most recent film to the director, David Lowery, who is occasionally nice enough to like look at stuff. And I was like, I don't really know what it is. I don't know. I can't point to another movie and be like, oh, it's like this movie. And he was like, that's how it always feels, in the best scenario. It should always feel like, I don't know what this is. And I think with St. Francis, what I learned was that when you do make choices in the way that you shoot something, it does radically affect how it's consumed. Because I think that film could have been directed in a way where people really rejected it as, as sentimental or as cute. And I think we really tried to undercut it in the way that we filmed it, in the way that it was directed. And to be fair, though, Kelly's script was never meant to be sentimental or cutesy. So I think we were all kind of fighting the same fight, but that you can do a lot just by, putting a little, I don't know, cutting through. If things tend this way, if you slice this way, you're going to come up with something complex. So I think it was a cool experience to do a film like that and have the audience reaction be so positive and so open. I mean, some people hated the movie, but
really, didn't seem like a lot of people hated it.
Oh man, I every once in a while I'll go on Letterboxd and I'll read, people. I mean, Letterboxd is a tough crowd, but some people definitely didn't love it as much as others, but it was nice to. And I understand why. I'm the film's worst critic. I see all the flaws, but but it is a really unique experience to have a film actually connect with people in an audience, and to get to hear that. And it makes it really hard to set out and make the next film and be like, screw them, screw the audience. I don't give a shit about them. When you've just had this experience where it's like, oh wow, this is what it feels like when you connect with an audience. Why would I throw that away? Because they're always going to be watching. You're always going to have an audience. And so you do kind of have a choice about whether you're going to dismiss them or embrace them or try to make them, how you're going to play with them and expect their viewership. Yeah. This next film literally ends with fireworks, which is great, but in a very sort of counter way, where it's like it ends in a very, very dark, sad place, but there are fireworks outside. And so again, like trying to play with this idea of a lift that takes you to that blackout. And so I'm excited. I don't know how people are going to react to this film. It's very different. It's very unusual and very unusual. It's like a psychological thriller, It's not St. Francis. Yeah, Danielle.
person. No, I was gonna
I
say.
love that because that felt so much like a classroom. She raised her hand, and you were like, because you're you're used to that.
Yeah, I guess on Zoom.
Like I personally like when movies end like that, when there's like, there's something happy going on, like, somewhere else. But
Mhm.
in the world of the character, their specific moment isn't happy. So I think by how the ending, like by what you made it sound, I already like the movie.
Well,
So
we're already
yeah.
giving it a thumbs up. 5
Yeah.
stars. for-
Yes.
I'm already expecting something good from this movie, just
Yes.
because, we associate fireworks with like a celebration. And then
Yeah.
by what you said, the character is not experiencing,
celebrating.
like it's not celebrating at the end of the movie. So it's always interesting, like how people mix it together, those two, like a celebration, like maybe like it was almost in Harry, when Harry met Sally, kind of like, and at the very end in New Year's,
Yeah.
everyone else was celebrating except the two of them. It was going to be a 50-50 way, kind of,
Yeah.
either they go like either they don't end up together or they do. So it was kind of like, we were just hauled into their own little world. So
Yeah. This
and I
is set
think
for New Year's as well. So
oh,
wow.
perfect. Oh wow.
Yeah.
Well, look at that.
What everyone's saying reminds me of, you all remember that film by, oh god, what's his name? De Palma, Blowout.
Blowout. Yeah.
Yeah. When you were saying fireworks and but like everyone's in a bad place, it made me think of that film.
Oh man, that's a great one.
Because
That's
literally, it's like a fire. It's like a 4th of July or like a Memorial's Day celebration, and like, spoiler alert, one of the main characters is dead at the end of the film. And I'm not gonna say who, but someone important dies, and it's not fun. And
yeah.
is that I don't even want to go into the end. I don't want to know the end of your movie.
Listen, you don't want to know the end. I need you not to know it, in fact, so that when you see it, you can tell me if it makes a lick of sense. So
it kind of reminded me also of that movie with Brad Pitt and Anthony Hopkins, Meet Joe Black, I think that's what it is. At the very end, it also does the same thing, it's a sad ending. I cried my eyes out at the ending. I was just like, just because I love Anthony Hopkins, I wasn't mostly sad because, like, Brad Pitt and the girl didn't end up together. I was mostly sad because, like, it's a celebration for him. I think it was like his birthday party or something, right?
Yeah.
And then Brad Pitt's character is death, but death got a kind of like a little taste of life, of what it is like to live.
Such a good movie.
It is.
That's such a good movie.
I have been wanting to watch it again, but I don't feel like crying, so I've been saving it for like a like a rainy day kind of vibe.
Maybe the follow-up episode is like a beautiful people in unexpectedly melancholy movies, like Brad, Meet Joe Black, Magic Mike. I feel like there's got to be another one, but yeah.
Can we ask you one more question before?
Of course, I'll keep it short. I promise.
No. I want you to take this question as far as this question, because it's probably the most important question one of the most important questions we ask. We ask this of all our guests, is because people who are watching this podcast, or people who are want to make movies and television, and they're figuring it out. What is the best piece of advice that you can give to someone who's coming up, who wants to be a filmmaker, wants to make their first thing, and is a little lost getting there?
Yeah, what is the best piece? I know what I have said before in the past, which is, I think, really true. And maybe I'm thinking that I shouldn't say it because it feels almost cliche, but I really mean it. Well, yeah, I'll just say it, but I think like don't wait for anyone to give you permission to make something. You know, no one is there is no gatekeeper that is just going to let you in. You know, you really have to go to it yourself. St. Francis, you know, if St. Francis is the thing on my resume that feels like a success, that film was made in a vacuum. No one gave a shit about that film until it was, except for the people who worked on it, until it was like until after South by Southwest, you know, well after. But it was made with no expectations, as little money as humanly possible. I would just say, like, don't believe anyone who says you need a certain amount of money or a certain actor or a certain camera to like make something good. You know, everything that you can do to make something exceptional that's going to resonate with people and the people who matter to like for your next film, you don't need any of that stuff. Like, you literally just need a script that is good and a story that is good and actors who are great. You don't need famous people. You don't need pretty pictures. But I think the most important thing is to do it, to like make the first film, because you're not going to get better prepping for the first film. You're only going to get better after you make it, and while you're making it, and then make another one. But like, don't get caught up in like, what's my first film, what's my second film, what's my debut, what's my this, because I think that way is the way of the dinosaurs. Like, there is no make something great, or at least something that resonates personally with you, and like just keep, because you're just going to learn on it. You're going to learn on everyone, and you just have to persevere. There's like that horrible idea that like, if you stay up late enough, like you'll find someone else who's staying up late too. You know, if you're like single and out in the world, it's the same with films, you know, like you just have to stay up, because you know, you're the only, and don't compare yourself to other people. You're the only voice that matters for your journey. I don't know, that's probably like 6 things you could put on a coffee mug, but
I already wrote it all down. So I'm gonna like take a picture of it, make a copy of it, put it on a coffee mug. So
nice.
Yeah. I will drink that every morning.
Yeah, put it on a piece of
drink from it every morning.
You know? Yeah. But yeah, that's what I'd say. I hope that's useful.
Okay.
I think that's very useful. Alex, thank you again. Thank you so much.
Thank you both.
Yeah, thank you.
Great fun. Great use of what day is it? Tuesday. Great Tuesday.
Honestly, I don't think I'd rather be doing anything else aside from maybe making it a movie or a television show. But that's aside from that, this is probably one of the best things that you could be doing with your time.
I would agree.
Yes.
I would agree. Well, thanks again. And anytime you want me back, I'll be there. So
thanks, man. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.